Welcome back to our continuing coverage of Budget 2012. Where over the last hour or so here in NDTV Profit, we have been able to really go through some of the explanatory provisions in this, and we have come out with a massive bomb. And I'm going to get everyone's reaction to that in just a couple of minutes. But let me just welcome Tarun Kataria, Chief Executive Officer, Religare Capital Markets. We also have with us Dr. Pawan Goenka from Mahindra & Mahindra, and Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw also joining us. Tarun, before we start coming to the bombs that we found here on NDTV Profit, just your overall sense of the budget.
I think overall it was an uneventful budget. I think probably a little bit more credible than what we saw this time last year. The question that pops to my mind, and I've been sort of listening into some of the commentary that we've had on for a bit, 7.6% GDP growth, in my opinion, certainly is almost not achievable next year. In which case, some of the revenue numbers that we've sort of looked at over the last 2-3 hours, I think will be very hard to materialize. The sub 2% subsidy number of GDP also very hard to see crystallize. So I expect this 5.1 deficit number to be breached by at least 50, 60, 70 basis points. So I think it'll approach almost 6%. So, I mean, that said, at least these are sort of numbers you can work with. It was what I would say a blah budget, completely uneventful. And, let's see where we take it. But 7.6%, I don't think is happening, because there's nothing in here that would suggest that actually interest rates will come down aggressively over the next few months. GDP is in a sort of downward cycle, 6.1% last go around. So I think to make that turn, to go into positive GDP or change the trend of GDP to get to 7.6 for the fiscal, I don't think it's doable at all.
Okay, Dr. Pawan Goenka, your sense of what the budget has. There was lots in it for auto, in the sense of taxation of larger cars and things like that. What sort of an impact are you going to see in this? Perhaps you would be relieved that that tax on diesel vehicles specifically didn't come through.
Well, clearly that one single item, the tax on diesel vehicle, was a major concern for us, and that not happening is very good news for us. But as is being said by everyone, that the budget really is not doing anything that the finance minister talked about as his intention, in terms of the 5 points that he talked about that he wants to achieve, in terms of his concern for growth in industry, in terms of the intent to go for manufacturing to become 25% of GDP. Nothing is in this budget that's providing that long-term impetus, the growth that I can count on. A little bit tax increase here, a little bit subsidy increase there is what's happening. And I think, as just was said, that the believability of 5.1% fiscal growth and of 7.6% GDP growth right now, I think, is very low, because the numbers don't seem to add up for us to think that we will actually achieve 5.1% fiscal growth or 7.6% GDP.
Right. From the point of view of the auto industry, you think most of these excise hikes and the larger cars will all be passed on to consumers?
Well, they definitely will be passed on, at least by Mahindra & Mahindra, and I think that almost everybody will pass it on. It is going to have at least a short-term impact on demand, I think. And the excise duty actually does become very high now for large cars, with all the other surcharges and all. It's going up as high as 29%. So you take 29% excise duty, you add 12.5% compounding of VAT on that, and we are talking about taxes and duty at 45% level. That is actually very highly taxed. So it's a concern. Right. It's a concern, but something that you're taking stride.
Tarun, let me get one more sense from you. Tarun, the big thing that we've been really breaking for the last hour and a half is that in the explanatory memorandum, page 19, there's a provision in this which is retrospectively all the way back to 1962, trying to overturn whatever happened in the Vodafone case. If that happens, and I mean, that has happened, but if it's not reversed, is that something that you could think is going to cause a lot of concern?
Tarun, before you answer, Omkar here, let me quickly take you through the provision. This provision entirely is dictated by, in fact, it says so in the explanatory memorandum, is dictated by fixing certain judicial pronouncements that have created doubt, which is the reference to the Supreme Court judgment. Now onwards, the judgment that Supreme Court took based on the Income Tax Act 1961 will no longer go forward because they've changed the act with retrospective effect, and therefore if company A listed abroad sells company B to company B listed abroad and operating abroad an asset in India, all taxes will apply on that transaction, including withholding tax.
Is that
I think like others have said, I think it would be nothing. I think it would be nothing short of a disaster. I think. Yeah, and I think the hellish experience it's going to be to backtrack all the way to the 60s to actually claw back taxes that people didn't have to pay, I think will keep people busy for a very, very long time. It will be very negative from an FI perspective, from an FDI perspective. I have to believe that there are people who are more pragmatic than that, and so that actually to come through in law, I would like to think, perhaps it's optimistic, I'd like to think that actually won't happen because it is just something that should not be done.
No, I'm being, sorry, I just want to cut in. I'm being completely transparent about this. I think we have come up with this as a scoop. PwC noted it and showed it to us. We worked on it, and we are doing it with a purpose. Because if this is not taken out of the finance bill when it is debated, exactly as you said, we are going to shoot ourselves many times in the foot just because North Bloc got upset with the Supreme Court judgment.
Correct. And frankly, that's not the way to build policy. That's not a way to create an enticing and emerging market for investors, FDI or FI. So I'd like to believe something will be done. I think this would be nothing short of a disaster.
Okay, Dr. Goenka, Mr. Kataria, thank you for joining us. Dr. Goenka, let me just get some final thoughts from you. And any particular view on this, on changing laws retrospectively 30 years back, 40 years back? What does that do to credibility?
I'm not well versed in this.